Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regularly scheduled board meeting on 8 August 2022. It's good to have everyone here today, and we're going to go ahead and start off with a roll call. Mr. Pendleton.
Dr. Akbar.
Here.
Mr. Alexander.
Present.
Ms. Autry.
Here.
Dr. Hall.
Aye.
Ms. Jackson.
Present.
Mrs. McKittrick.
Here.
Mr. Perry.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now will stand if you can as we do the Pledge of Allegiance. And Ms. Jackson, do you mind leading us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We now move to item 1.3, which is community and school reflections. Any reflections from the board members? Ms. Autry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since we last met, I was able to attend one of our mystery camp showcases, and I chose to attend Schumacher CLC because that's close by where I live. So I dropped in, and I just wanted to commend the front office staff who wouldn't let me in because I didn't have my badge. And so luckily, Principal Haynes could vouch for me. And so, but they did a really good job, and it's nice to know that our children are being kept safe. But they absolutely wouldn't let me in. I got to visit Mrs. Connolly's class, and their theme was where food comes from. And so the students were able to visit farms throughout the mystery camps, did a lot of work about dairy products and meat and et cetera. They had a little song that they did at the end, so it was really nice to see, some of our funds at work with those summer programs. Also, I met with rising third graders, and their theme was Let the Games Begin. And they just demonstrated a lot of knowledge, knowing the terminology around computers. And their field trip was at a location called Snap. And I guess that's a place where you take lots of pictures, so the kids really love that. So, but it was just nice to see the young people engaged in some of our programming, seeing our dollars at work, and they also had a really huge Be Kind banner as you walk in. So it's nice to see that they're, involved with that. So, and that's all. But a good job to Schumacher CLC and Mr. Haynes and his team.
Thank you very much, Ms. Autry. Anyone else? Okay, no. All right, well, we will move to the item 1.4, request to address the board, and we have former board member, Reverend Byron Artledge. If you don't mind going to this podium here, you have 3 minutes to share with us. We look forward to hearing from you. And we just ask that you refrain from making any disparaging comments or any complaints about a specific staff member, which I know you won't do that. But if you do, let us know, and we will just do an executive session if you have that. So,
I want to tell you how excited I am to be back here. I spent over 40 years with Akron Public Schools, either as a board member or as a CEO of a mental health agency, pastoral counseling, which provided service to many, many, many of your children, ending my career with 2,500 children a week. You have an awesome responsibility, and I want to first of all make sure to thank you for what you do and the commitment that you have to this community as being a board member. I know what that is like, and I have to thank you so much for all the phone calls that you get middle of the night, all the irate parents. People didn't usually call me in the middle of the night to tell me how nice I was. And I know they don't call you in the middle of the night either to tell you that, but we have an awesome school system. I was president of the 8 large cities, school districts in the state of Ohio, and I could compare Cleveland and Youngstown. We have an awesome system. You all are the cheerleaders for this system. You are the ones who go out and be seen, community involvement. My responsibility that I wanted to give to you tonight is to talk with you about one of the major responsibilities that you have, and that is a cheerleader, and that is to raise funds, pass a levy for this district. In the years that I served, we had four different levies. We had a bond issue for the schools to be rebuilt. It is challenging. It's hard. There are many, many obstacles. The economy itself is an obstacle. When we started out, we could rely upon our school family, our children, our parents, staff. Our last levy 10 years ago, Ryan reminded me 10 years ago, we had less than 24% of the people who live in Akron had a child in Akron Public Schools. We couldn't rely upon the family. We had to get partnerships with the Catholic Diocese, with the Lions Club, everybody else. My challenge to you is remember that everything that you say, everywhere you go, remember over your head is levy, bond issue, levy. Major responsibility of the board is to pass the budget. Also responsibility is to secure the funds to pass that budget, and I challenge you for that. I want you to know that it's an awesome job that you have. I want you to know that the community thanks you and respects you for sitting here. This community has been very gracious in the passing of levies, and now it's your turn to go out every Sunday to a church. Churches are usually open on Sunday. Going to a church, going to football games, community involvement. It's never too early to start the campaigns for capital improvement and for an operating levy with Akron Public Schools. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your words. As we have no other requests to address the board, we will move to item 3, communications, our update around opening of schools. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board and also the community. With a few days to go until we are welcoming our students back, we thought we would provide you with a high-level update as to what we're doing to prepare for that. So I would ask Mary Outley, I believe, to come to the side, and also Tamiko Hatcher. They're going to present.
Thank you, Mrs. Fowler-Mack. Good evening, board. Good evening, APS families who are out there in viewer land, as well as everyone who are attending today's board meeting. My name is Tamiko Hatcher. I'm the Director of Special Programs. For those of you who have been working with our leadership team, my call name is Ghost, and you guys will hear a little bit more about that as the year moves through. I do apologize, but my slides are advancing for some reason. But I did want to take this opportunity to welcome everybody back for the 2022-2023 school year. We are extremely excited to welcome our halls for the 20,000 students who will be choosing to be educated throughout Akron Public Schools. My wonderful partner today will take you through a very short and brief high-level presentation is Mary Otley Kelly. Her call name is Cornerstone.
So good evening, everyone. Can you believe it seems like just yesterday we were saying goodbye for the summer to our students and our families, and before we knew it, we are here today with 21 days before they return. Now, I must do a disclaimer. We do have some schools that are already prepared to come back, and one that is currently back, and that is I Promise. So I Promise actually started school, and then on Wednesday of this week, we have Akron Early College and STEM High School will begin. So part of the work that we have been busy doing impacts many other departments across the district. One of our major objectives is to ensure that our students are returning to a building that's warm, safe, and dry. And we cannot give enough gratitude to Deborah Falk and all of those that work with her in buildings and grounds to help get our buildings prepared for our scholars.
So the dynamic staff, making sure that they have every opportunity available to educate our students to become the best entrepreneurs, the best higher educational educators, as well as those individuals who choose to embrace the world of the military. So in order to do that, our staff has sent you a message to actually make a very strong commitment to empower our students that while they are planning their wonderful lessons, that they want to do so with a couple of things at the forefront, and that is providing our students with an opportunity to have a voice in their classroom. In addition to that, we've also made a commitment to allow students to see themselves in the work in which they will embrace and the opportunities and outcomes that they will experience throughout their academic year. The other portions of that is really creating this wonderful element that you will see in our 330 initiative. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide, but the ultimate goal is to make sure that we create a positive learning environment and culture, so when students enter our classrooms, they enter our hallways, and they enter our buildings, that they have a wonderful opportunity to be their best and be who they are when they embrace their education. And in doing so, that positive, joyful, learning environment is what we all aspire to have as we walk in and out of our buildings. And even in some cases when you need to look through the door and say, I am a board member, but we want to make sure that we keep those students safe while they're learning.
And so we have some helpful tips for our families who are listening in. We are asking them to partner with us, which they always have been our partners, but to help ensure that their scholar is ready to embrace each day. This year, as last year, we have a staggered start. I'll focus on elementary, and then Tamika will give you an idea about our secondary staggered start. At the elementary level, it gives our students and our teachers an opportunity to develop relationships with their students in a one-on-one environment with appointments. And we also give an assessment to our children so that we know exactly where they are early on so that we can provide the necessary interventions right off the bat, and also enrichment opportunities.
At the secondary level, I think we've all experienced being the person that's at the high portion of that totem pole. In elementary grades, you leave 5th grade, and then you all of a sudden go from, hey, I understand the campus, I'm ready to navigate, and then you transition into those middle school years, and all of a sudden, you're not the biggest, you're not the fastest, you may not even be the smartest because you're in a very unfamiliar environment. So in our staggered starts, we begin with our earlier grades to provide them an opportunity to navigate the building. And in some cases, it's only a third of the school there. And that is where we rally our staff to really welcome those students and to give them an environment that they don't have to worry about navigating the higher grades. And then on day 2, we slowly fill the halls as we move from either 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, or as we begin from 9th grade, we transition everyone in until we reach our full capacity. That is intentional and deliberate because we recognize during those stages of high transition, it's very difficult to navigate a foreign environment, and our staggered starts allow us to do that.
So while our 4th, 5th, and elementary 6th grade students are back in classes starting on August 29th, our kindergarten 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade students, again, will be meeting with their teachers in a one-on-one environment. Also, we wanted to give our parents an update. I feel like, ooh, it's magic. An update that the board has agreed for this academic year to suspend our uniform policy. So we will not be in uniforms for the 22-23 school year, and masks currently are optional. We also encourage our families to check out our website where you can find open house information. Many of our schools have open house before school start, and that is intentional because we provide more accurate supply lists that you'll need. So please wait and see your teachers before you go out and spend a lot, because we are really going to work on making sure the kids have what they need. And then if there's any additional items that we need our parents to provide, you'll find that out from your teachers. But I know if you're anything like me and you have I have a niece in the house, and she cannot wait to go to my money on back-to-school items. There is a general list on our website where you can go if it's just burning a hole in their pocket to spend some of that money on school supplies, because we know it's an exciting time of year.
So the message to our students, as we get prepared to embrace you in our halls, we want to make sure that the time is now. As Mrs. Otley Kelly said, we have 21 days. And we recognize to get prepared for the summer, it might include staying up late, hanging out watching YouTube videos. It may even include some form of esports or just communicating with your friends. But it is so important now that we begin to transition into our scholar mode. And that begins with a nice, healthy routine, small adjustment to getting to bed early, and being able to wake up during the times to catch that bus. In addition to that, Chromebooks. We mentioned our technology team really putting and equipping our students with an opportunity to interact, not only here locally, but also globally. And it's so important that those devices work. And sometime a nice little plug into the wall helps us ensure that that happens throughout the entire day. So if we could begin to charge those in the event that they find that there's something wrong over the summer, let's get those into our schools so we can get those necessary repairs prior to the start. In addition to that, we really want to emphasize how important it is to be a leader. And in many cases that we all have an opportunity and can make a choice to be first. Be the first to class, be the first to smile, and more importantly, be the first to be kind. And I mentioned before that we talk about that Be Kind 330. And it's almost as important as saying you need to be kind 365 days a year. But we really wanted to put some emphasis on what happens in our area code. So with all that being said, as you guys are out there in student land, and as we continue to, as the adults, influence the students and getting them ready for a scholarly mind, it begins with that 21 days and making the necessary adjustments so that they can put their right foot forward.
We will open it up to any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Dr. Hall?
So first, let me say thank you for a fantastic presentation. I just have one clarifying question. It was in regards to the staggered start. I think it's a great idea. I would have loved to have had a couple of days, especially in junior high, before the 8th graders got there. So what's the lead time for the staggered start? So if you're a sixth grader now, junior high, how many days do you get in the building before the big kids come? Is it 1 day, 2 days, 3 days?
Yeah, it's 1 day. So in middle school, we'll begin with 6th graders. And then the next day, it's 6th and 7th grade. Then the third day, it's 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. At the high school level, begin at 9th grade level, and then slowly transition in to make sure that everyone gets acclimated.
Gotcha. And then, I'm sorry, one more question, if I may, about the Chromebooks. What's the process for orienting families on sort of the proper utilization, especially new families to the district, whether it be kindergartners or folks that are just getting a new Chromebook? What's the process for how we orient them around, proper utilization of it? And then also, if you have repairs that need to be done, like here's who you call. I guess that's my other question.
So we have what we call TSSs at all of our levels, K-12, and they are awesome at preparing, working with our families around how to maneuver our Chromebooks. We actually trained them last year for when our parents came in for the one-on-one appointments. They actually did a session with the parents while the students were working with their teachers. And so also when we go back to school, our teachers also give them information on the Home Access Center, which we also call HACC, so that they understand how they can see assignments online. So it's a partnership.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I want to say thank you for the presentation and the information about opening school. The one question I do have is about masks, considering the higher rates of transmission, and whether or not we're going to send a message, or if we've sent a message on that yet.
We do plan to send a message updating, the parents on where we are, both in terms of the trends in the community and also what our stance is. So our stance at this moment is still encouraged, but optional. And so we did find that while still encouraging that, but leaving that to families, even in the spring, there was a great deal of mask wearing that was occurring in our schools. But we're expecting some updating from the CDC, so we've been notified to expect information any day now from them, and we have been in contact with the local authorities as well. So we will be providing some updates to families.
Yeah, just a quick follow-on to that. Are we going to continue to supply masks for students and staff that would request them?
We do still have a supply of masks, yes.
All right.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And now we move to item 4, approval of the previous meeting minutes for the regular meeting on 25 July 2022. Is there a motion on the table?
I so move.
Properly moved by Mr. Perry. Is there a second? Ms. Autry? Okay. I'm like, I heard something, but I didn't know who it was. Thank you very much. Seconded by Ms. Autry. Any discussion on the approval of the minutes? Okay, hearing and seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote, please. Mr. Pendleton.
Dr. Hall,
Aye.
Ms. Jackson,
Aye.
Mrs. McKittrick,
Yes.
Dr. Akbar,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Ms. Autry,
Yes.
Mr. Perry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move to personnel recommendations. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, prior to asking for approval of the personnel recommendations, we do have one recognition that is extremely important, and I'm going to ask Dr. Hall to join me to the right podium, and also Mrs. Outley to also join me at the right podium. This very, very special recognition was actually highly encouraged, but easily embraced by the administrative team, but was encouraged by Dr. Hall right away because we have had a special gem in our midst for a very long time that has decided to retire. And we could not allow that to go through as just a line on an agenda, on a board agenda. We just felt like we needed to take a moment to say thank you and to recognize this service. Mrs. Philomena Vincente is a graduate of St. Vincent High School. She obtained her bachelor's degree in education from Bowling Green University and her master's degree in principal licensure from the University of Akron. Philomena continued her learning at Kent State University, earning her master's plus 18. Mrs. Vincente began working for Akron Public Schools in 1970 as an elementary teacher at David Hill until June of 2000. In 2002, she was appointed as an elementary principal at Leggett Elementary School, where she has remained for 16 years, to the great applause of Mrs. Outley. In 2018, she moved to Glover's CLC and continued in her principal role until she recently retired. Throughout her career, Phil developed and maintained many community partnerships for the students and families. She will be greatly missed by all. We would like to take this time to congratulate And thank you, Mrs. Vincente, for your 52 years of service to the Akron Public Schools. We want to wish you well on the next chapter of your life in retirement. So would you all join me in a hearty round of applause in welcoming Mrs. Vincente.
I'm going to try to get through a speech. I'm not sure that I can, but this is something that you always knew was down the road, but I never thought that I would be standing here today. But I want to just start out by saying it's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank the superintendent and the Board of Education and senior staff and the staff at APS for all that they have done for me over the 52 years in my career. It doesn't seem that long ago that Eugene Dominic called me and offered me a contract with APS with a salary of $7,000. I was in heaven. I was assigned to David Hill School in the 4th grade. I walked into the room with 25 desks, and that was it. No chalk, no erasers, no books. My mother was actually in the first class to attend David Hill when it opened. I spent 30 years at David Hill and left when it was still the old building. When they were ready to tear down the old building, I went and got my door. I had opened that door for 30 years, and I realized that I needed to take that door home with me, which I did in the back of my truck, and it's sitting on my porch with the key in the door. I started my career in administration as an assistant principal at Roswell, Kent, thanks to Richard Roberts. I told him I never had been in a true middle school, and he told me I would do fine after spending 30 years in the Garfield cluster, and he was right. After 2 years, I was selected as the new principal at Leggett, where I spent 16 years. It was so exciting to help design and move into the new building. The last 4 years, I have been at Glover. My philosophy always has been putting the students in the best possible place to be successful. I was always looking for opportunities for my students. My David Hill students had pen pals that were Amish. We rode back and forth and visited their school and points of interest around the school, and they visited us in the spring with a picnic. I guess this is where my involvement in community began. We started community support with the chapel my first year at Leggett. We started community support by the chapel providing uniforms, winter coats, and bags of love, after-school tutoring, Camp Learn a Lot in the summer, Thanksgiving dinner, carnivals, and more for the students. Many of my students never knew what a Thanksgiving dinner was until we had the chapel. We did an annual walk away from violence with the chapel and the Akron PD. The partnership has grown and expanded over the years to now include other schools. Give Kids a Smile Day was something that we also did in February because my kids needed to go to the dentist. And that is a statewide program, and we hosted the statewide program 1 year at Leggett. Bright Books, and the list goes on. We raised money so my kindergarten students could go to the zoo. Every child should go to the zoo in kindergarten. I think that is an important passage for kindergarten students. We did make-it-take-it sessions for incoming kindergarten students to work on KRA skills, meet the teachers, and take home a goodie bag and a school T-shirt. Thank you to APS for giving me the opportunity to mentor teachers through turnaround schools of the University of Virginia, for mentoring principals through my APA work, for being able to present to the governor for Ready Schools when Leggett was one of the original leaders in the state, and then I was also able to present at the OA-ESA convention. I can proudly say I've had students become high-ranking members of the Air Force, attending the Air Force Academy after graduation from East High School, or proudly teaching and following the career of one of my present board members, Derek Hall. When students have come back to visit, they always ask for a hug. I made it a point to hug each of my students as they exited the building each evening because that might be the only hug that they would get in a day. It is always special to have students you had in school bring their children to my school. Many fond memories I have cherished, and I am a proud mother bird that encourages her flock to spread their wings and conquer the world. I have seen a lot over the years. I have been through 6 superintendents. There have been many people that have been there to support and encourage me. Thank you to Deborah Folk for always taking my questions and answers and approving all of my building permits and encouraging me. Thank you to Kathy McVeigh and Todd Wamas for always being there to answer my personnel questions and union questions. Thank you to Karen Gigic and her teaching and learning department for their support that they have given myself and the staff over the years and giving their expertise to us. Thank you to Howard Lawson for your guidance and patience with a techie rookie and guiding me along the way. There are just so many fine people at APS that have helped me grow as a person. I want to thank my husband for understanding my late nights and making sure my students had what they needed. To my children, Beth, who is following in my footsteps as an assistant principal at Ennis. Jennifer, who is an HR manager in her company. Kristen, who is a pharmacist for more than 20 years. And my son, David, who is a math teacher at Canton Central Catholic. And to my 2 in-laws, Josh and Karen. And my 7 grandchildren, who I'm sure will keep me in the school mode as a grandma. Thank you for giving me the opportunity for serving the city of Akron and the Akron Board of Education for 52 years. Thank you.
Hey, Mark, can I get one just with
He said just with him.
and then I'll step aside. Just gotta get one. Just you're the expert.
And may I say something? So, Mrs. Vicente, I have the pleasure of coming as a new board member to Glover and to walk around. And you know, it's the saying, you know, a tree by its fruit. And everything that she read, this lady is really that. And your commitment to education was so clear. I felt so welcome as a new board member into your building. And I remember you had called me to your office, had a nice little gift bag, just very classy, where I felt like, I feel like I should have brought something. It was her building, it was her home, and she was welcoming me into her home. And your student ambassadors were amazing as they walked me around. And so it's just a delight. And, you know, I'm encouraged and saddened all at the same time because I actually felt your presence and was able to meet you. And I know that you really had a heart for those children. And not to say that I don't believe that the superintendent in her wisdom will, you know, try to make sure the right person is in the building, but when you know a person that was really committed, and that was off of one moment. And I think Mary Hockey was there. I was so taken by Glover, I just didn't want to leave. I kept, you know, I like to talk. I stayed there for an extra, hour or something, Mary, talking to you about, yeah, they should do this. Oh, this is great, because it opened my eyes, as I shared so many times, superintendent, to what the district has to offer, how we are serving our learners, how there are administrators and educators who truly care. And, you know, as the saying says, it rains on the just and unjust alike. And I understand that we still have work to do. But I thank you for your work and your commitment. And I want you to know that I value you. And even though just a quick meeting, I was able to see the heart of who you were. Well, thank you.
And I just said, you guys know I have one more comment. There are a lot of traits and attributes that you think about that a teacher would embody, right? But I think perhaps the most important one is that it's a student that you feel loved. And I had her 2 years in a row, 5th and 6th grade. I don't know how she got through 2 years dealing with me. She did not let me go on the 6th grade class trip because I was tripping, wasn't behaving. But again, every day I was in her classroom, I went home and I felt I was loved. Every day I felt I was loved, and that makes discipline and criticism easier to take when you know it's being delivered with love. And so I love you, and I look forward to staying in touch with you. And to Jennifer and Beth and David, Beth and Kristen and David, Jennifer's not here. You're going to be sharing her with me in retirement, just so you know. So anyway, thank you so much.
NJ.
Ms. Alexander?
Yes. I couldn't let this opportunity go by either, Ms. Vincente. I met her when I first came on the board as well as Mrs. Jackson, and I went to her school, and every school that she was in, I was in, and it was always love for the kids. As she said, love, and that's one of the things that's so important to me, that they show love to the kids, because when you show that love, they feel cared, they feel wanted, they feel that someone cares about them, and it makes the learning environment much better. And she has been that type of person. I just couldn't let it go without saying anything. And one other thing, one year, it's been probably about 6-7 years ago, I was in a very bad car accident. I couldn't go to work, I couldn't do anything. And so I went to Portland, Oregon, and there was a group of teachers there and some principals, and Mrs. Vincente was there. And I just observed what was going on, how she treated the teachers, and how the relationship was with her and the teachers, and it was just so nice, and you can tell that all of them learned, but it was because of her leadership and her being there, guiding them, teaching them, mentoring them. It was very, very nice to see, and that was something I didn't plan on seeing, but I did see, and it was very, very good. So thank you for everything that you've done for the Akron Public Schools and every single student that you've made who they are today, such as Mr. Hall. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. And also, just on behalf of the entire board, again, great job, well-deserved retirement. We know that you're probably one of those people who won't truly retire completely, but we definitely appreciate you and the years of service that you've given to this district. And we talk about what excellence looks like, and Ms. Jackson talks about it all the time, but I believe that you are one of those examples. So thank you again for your service. And with that, we will, I'm sorry, do you have anything else? I'm sorry. Yep.
Yes. So again, thank you, board leadership, for that very appropriate recognition. And before I officially ask I recommend approval of the personnel recommendations presented in categories 5 through 17, we are going to make some important announcements. So I'm going to ask Kathy McVeigh to come to the side because we have some administrators that complete our organizational restructuring, and so we want to, and also are backfilling some retirement positions. So we're going to make those introductions, and then we'll go ahead and request approval of the personnel recommendations.
Thank you. Tonight I have 3 brief introductions for you. The first is an introduction, unfortunately he had to leave, but it's of Dr. Stephen Thompson. Dr. Thompson, tonight we are recommending him for our new Chief Operations Officer position. He has a bachelor's degree in social studies, master's degree in special education, and a doctor of education in K-12 educational leadership, along with his superintendent certification. He is the current superintendent at Willoughby Eastlake Schools, and prior to that was a superintendent at Chagrin Falls Exempted Village and West Liberty Salem Schools. He is currently also filling the role of Director of Operations in addition to his current duties. He also served as a district representative during the construction of 2 new high schools at his district and 1 new elementary building, along with the renovation of 12 other district facilities, and developed and implemented their district's 5-year strategic plan. But as I said, he unfortunately could not stay for the rest of the board meeting, so he had to leave early. Next, I'd like to introduce Nicole Vitale. Nicole, if you could please step up to the podium there, please. Ahead of time this time. Nicole was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. She has over 25 years of experience working in education, including educational leadership experience. Her experience in education has included serving in multiple capacities with the Cleveland Municipal School District. She's been a classroom teacher, instructional coach, interim deputy chief of curriculum and instruction, and lastly, executive director of early childhood and literacy. Tonight, we are recommending her for the executive director of teaching and learning position, replacing Karen Gigic, who recently retired.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. Can I pull this out? There, that's better. Thank you for this opportunity. When I saw the job description, I really felt like it was a great fit for me. But then when I was able to meet the team during the interview process, I was excited about their enthusiasm, and I could tell that they have laid such great groundwork to move the vision forward. So with that, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity, and I appreciate the consideration.
Thank you. Donald Zessiger, if you could please step up to the podium. Donald has served in different positions related to safety and security. He started as a parole officer for Kent State University and then held several positions with the Talmadge Police Department, patrol officer, detective bureau, patrol sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and he retired as the chief of police there. He then worked for Akron Children's Hospital as a security officer, a special duty with Summit County Sheriff's Office, and court security officer for the U.S. Marshal Service with Walden Security. Lastly, he's been employed by the Akron Police Department as a police liaison with Akron Public Schools. Tonight, we are recommending him for our new Director of Safety and Security position.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited about this opportunity. I'm very grateful, and I can't wait to get started.
Thank you. With those introductions made, I am going to recommend approval of the personnel recommendations presented in categories 5 through 17. I did want to bring to the board's attention, though, there is one unfortunate. We've had lots of celebration and introduction, but also within the personnel section in item 16.1, we regret to report the death of Daryl Zeno, who passed away on July 27th of this year. Mr. Zeno was an employee of the Akron Board of Education for only 1 year. He's been a part-time mail truck driver with us, though, since 2021. His wife is a teacher at Ellet, and so because persons knew him through his wife and also through his short but impactful service, we just wanted to send our condolences to the family and to draw that to your attention as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Superintendent. So we have the personnel recommendations in categories 5 through 17. Is there a motion on the table?
I so move.
It's been moved by Mr. Perry. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Mr. Alexander. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote, please. Mr. Pendleton.
Ms. Jackson?
Aye.
Mrs. McKittrick?
No on 5.8, 6.1, 6.3, 6.4. Yes on the balance.
Thank you. Dr. Akbar?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Autry?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Dr. Hall?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now move to resolutions and motions on the consent agenda. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, I wish to recommend approval of the resolutions and motions presented in category 22. They are in proper format, and I move for their approval.
Thank you very much. We have the resolutions and motions on the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is it properly moved by Ms. McKittrick? Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Perry. Any discussion on the resolutions and motions? Hearing and seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote, please. Mr. Pendleton.
Mrs. McKittrick?
Yes.
Dr. Akbar,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Ms. Autry,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
Dr. Hall,
Aye.
Ms. Jackson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move to business affairs recommendations. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, sir. I wish to recommend approval of the business affairs recommendation presented in category 23.
Thank you very much. Been properly recommended. For the business affairs recommendations, is there a motion on the table?
So moved.
Properly moved by Mr. Alexander. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Autry. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing and seeing none, roll call vote, please. Mr. Pendleton?
Dr. Akbar,
Yes, but abstain on 23.12.
thank you. Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Ms. Autry,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
Dr. Hall,
Aye.
Ms. Jackson,
Yes.
Mrs. McKittrick,
No on 23.7, 23.21, 23.30, and 23.34. Yes on the rest.
thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move into our superintendent's report. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, sir. Tonight, we're going to be providing the board with a brief but important update on the racial equity policy that the board has put in place. Part of that policy requested that the superintendent and then, by extension, staff be prepared annually to update the board on particular items. And so I'm going to be joining my colleagues here at the side podium, but this evening our report will include items requested then by the racial equity policy or the resolution on racism. Tonight you will hear about our equity work taking place within our Human Resources Office. We'll get a brief review of some disaggregated student level data on discipline and learn more about the professional development and training taking place throughout the district. We'll be starting with a update from Angela Carter, our recruitment and retention manager.
Good evening. Just so you can go back to the last slide. So I just wanted you to just like an overview of who we are as a district. We are a diverse district as it relates to our staff and our students, and we know that we're trying to become even more diverse within our workforce. And so I just wanted to show you where we are now. And where we are now as it relates to APS educators, and when I say APS educators, I'm talking about all of our faculty and our staff. And so this is just a comparison from 2020-2021 school year to 21-22 school year. And this is at the end of the school year. And so what this is a picture of who we are from July 1st to June 30th, because that's our calendar school year. And this data was pulled from our Tableau system, which communicates with another system called Munis, but that's just a bunch of stuff you really don't need to know. But anyway, I think I'm telling myself that so I'll know where to pull this from next year when we put on 22-23. So just making a note to myself that we want to make sure that we're consistent with how we're tracking our data, because data is very important. And so you can see where we were as a staff in 2020, 76% white, 1.3% Asian, 21.7% black, 0.8% Hispanic, and then more than one race, we have 0.2%. And if you look at 21-22, we really didn't change that much. We have 75.1% white, 1.6% Asian, 22.4% black, 0.8% Hispanic, and 0.1% more than one race. And then now we're just going to look a little deeper. And so if we look at our administrative staff as it relates to everyone that is coded as an administrator within our district, that's us in the room as it relates to being the recruitment and retention manager, Carla being the officer of diversity, equity, and inclusion, our superintendent, as well as you as our board members. And so we had in 2021, 72.5% white, 1% Asian, 26% black, and Hispanic we had 0.5%. White for the 21-22 school year, 74.2%, Asian 1%, and then black 24.8%. And then now let's look at our members of our teaching staff. Members of our teaching staff includes our teachers and our tutors, and then all students, all teachers and all educators that fall within our AEA union group. And so in 2020, 2021, we had 0.3% more than one race, 84.4% white, 0.8% Asian, 13.9% black, and 0.6% Hispanic. And then in the 21-22 school year, we did drop a little bit, and we'll talk more about where we are as a district next board meeting as relates to where we are with our 3 and 3 advance plan, because that's one thing that we know that we're working on. And so right now, we're looking at where we are right now. We have 11.7% black, 0.7% Hispanic, 0.2% more than one race, 86.2% white, and 1.2% Asian. And then our paraprofessional staff looks a little different. Paraprofessionals are our teacher assistants, our teacher educational assistants that are within the classroom, our LRC technicians. And so we have 52.3% white in the year 2020, 2021, 5.5% Asian, 39.8% black, 0.1% more than one race, and then 2.3% Hispanic. In the 21-22 school year, 6.4% Asian, 38.8% black, 1.6% Hispanic, and 53.2% white. And so the policy reads, the district will review its current recruitment, screening, and interview processes and procedures, and where possible, will implement updated processes and procedures that are racially equitable across the district. So some of the things that we're doing as it relates to making sure that we're living out what the policy calls for is that we are looking at our data, using our data to help with forecasting staffing needs, determining who is underrepresented, and then also using that information for our marketing campaigns to appeal to diverse populations. Also, we have our AREL process in place. That's the Alternative Resident Educator Licensure Program, where we have provided alternative teacher preparation programs for some of our substitute teachers and our educational professionals, which is awesome because it's kind of like a fast track for people who have a bachelor's degree who are currently working for us as a substitute or an educational assistant paraprofessional to get licensed as a teacher. Also, we're looking at our hiring practices, and this is something, as educators, we know that we are reflective within our practice, and so that's something that we're trying to refine and get better at doing as it relates to early hiring when possible. And so the best practice is hiring new teachers at least 1 month before the prior of the next school year. And so we are getting better with making sure we're identifying who's leaving early. We're reaching out to school principals and asking them to reach out to their staff so that we know who's retiring, who needs to resign because they're moving or something, other kind of situation that's going on, so that we can plan ahead. And then also our interview process. We're looking at our interview questions, making sure that we're capturing questions that are going to let us know the mindset of our candidates that are coming in as it relates to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then also, we're making a practice to have diverse teams for the interview process. So having a diverse panel on the interview teams. And then also, and in the HR department as well as in the community relations department, we are a part of the TNTP program, where it's an ongoing collaboration of other school districts across the country, where it's a professional learning community, because again, we're always trying to get better. We're collaborating with people. They have the same kind of goals that we have as it relates to diversifying the educational workforce. And so it's a consortium of educators and HR recruiters in hopes of coming up with creative and innovative ways to diversify our workforce. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mrs. Fowler-Mack.
Do you need a clicker mover?
Okay, I think I'll be good. Thank you. One of the things, in addition to really being asked to be very intentional about our recruitment and hiring practices, the policy also asked us to review disaggregated discipline data by violation at a minimum, but not limited to factors of race and gender combined, to look at our data by school, and then even to get more granular with our data and to begin to address disparities within that data. I will say we appreciate the leadership and charge of the board that is really embodied within this policy, and we are on the path to being able to do just what you asked. What we'll be able to do today is to share some high-level summary data that really shows that we are beginning to look at our discipline data and to better understand it. As we get into next board meeting, talking about an update on the advanced APS 3 and 3 goals that went even more specific into some other pieces of data and information that it wanted to make sure was being monitored and responded to, we'll even be able to give more information. So we're not going to go into today every single category, but we will be able to share with you at a high level some of the categories. One of the things that we're monitoring very carefully, as was requested, is our out-of-school suspensions, making sure that we are aware of whenever students are excluded from the educational process, being aware of what that means, what it looks like, who's being impacted, and really, even beyond that, making sure that if there are any barriers to our students being able to maintain appropriate behavior, or teachers who might need supports in supporting our students, that we are very proactive and aware relative to that. So on this slide, you have the information. You can see our out-of-school suspensions by grade, and if we look at those grade bands, we will say our most pronounced out-of-school suspension trends continue to be, I think, developmentally where we would anticipate our middle grades. And so we are continuing to think about what it is, how it is we're responding, and to evaluate that. We also looked at our alternative out-of-school suspensions to say that not all suspensions were suspensions where students were sent to their respective homes. We do have a number of alternative school programs and supports available to our students, and you can see by grade bands how it is, especially with our earliest learners, that we do utilize as well alternative out-of-school suspensions and not just the more traditional types. If we were to break down that data even further and to look at our out-of-school suspensions by gender, we would see that predominantly students who are being suspended are males, and that has been more so a consistent trend. So really thinking about how it is we are supporting our young men, and asking what data should do is to drive us to additional questions as we really think about the success of our students and the success of our staff and supports for our staff as well. Alternative suspensions, again, by gender. Again, males are more of a predominant in that category as well. When we look at the out-of-school suspensions by race, we also have some trends that we are spending time exploring even more deeply. Our out-of-school suspensions by race predominantly impacts Black students in our district, who make up about 46% of the student body within our district. As well, do out-of-school suspensions, the alternatives by race. There is a noticeable trend that the team, we're starting to really dig into even more. They've been having conversations and digging into this data, but myself, being a new member of the team, is becoming very familiar with what our data says. One of the other pieces of data that we monitor pretty closely is not just the discipline itself, but we also look at some of the outcomes, some of the strategies that we're using as a result of the discipline or behavior. And so one of those really has to do with our transfer of students, especially the transfer of students who have been involved in any cases involved with assault. And so we are taking a look at where are those gray bands of occurrence, and then where do we have students who have then been moved from one building to another building. And we, part of our responsibility is definitely to hold our students responsible, but also to continue to look at the equity in the data, and then also to ensure that we have proper supports so that our students, once at their new building, can get off to a better start there. The discipline transfer trends by gender, again, continue to uphold, kind of similarities to the students who are being disciplined by gender. So more of our males by gender are being transferred as a result of this assault in particular in our system. So that is the beginnings of looking at some of our data. Again, we are going to get even more granular with looking at the data as the policy calls for, and both in next week's, when we're talking about some of the goals that was set forth in the advanced APS 3 and 3, we will be able to give more information. And then as we go along, we will also begin to share, the research and best practices that we're finding as we begin to work through issues of climate, culture, behavior, and equity. Also embedded within the resolution on racism, in Section 8, there was a call for the superintendent and team to publish student rights and responsibilities when engaging with school resource officers' charge. This item is in progress, so we do have some draft information around what that student rights and responsibilities might look like. We really believe this is something that really needs input and feedback. So we're in the process of gathering input and feedback from parents, from our educators. We will with our board through the board's committees. So we have addressed this as the policy is asking to do so, but we do feel like we need that information prior to sending that out to our students and our families. Okay. Carla?
So one of the items in the resolution on racism, as well as the racial equity policy, spoke to mandated, required training for our staff, and we have started that work, especially with the adoption of our new vision of excellence through equity. And we wanted to give you just a snapshot of what has taken place as part of this first wave of equity training in our district, which is centered around the vision and the theory of action. And so between June and August 30th of this year, we will have touched 2,817 staff members, and you see the breakout there. And I think Dr. Caver and Rachel, I should add today's session with about how many administrators? 200. About 220 administrators. And so we have a team that is very committed to this work, and I guess I need to say that they are also team members who have other responsibilities in the district, but they feel so strongly about the work that we are doing that they're committed to doing this on afternoons, early mornings, Saturdays. And so we are here moving through the district with our racial equity training. More extensive work will be offered during the school year at school buildings and for 100% of our new faculty entering their new roles in our district. And the objectives of this work will include developing the shared understanding of our APS vision of excellence through equity and the theory of action, co-creating a common language around diversity, equity, and inclusion, what we mean when we talk about culturally responsive practices, implicit bias, understanding the historical and systemic racism and marginalization in our community, as well as exploring self-awareness as the first level of being culturally responsive and engaging with our scholars and families. And then finally, after August 30th, we will begin the work with TNTP, stands for the New Teacher Project. That is not solely what they do now, but after August 30th, we will begin the work with TNTP on further designing a district-wide implementation strategy for supporting equity work throughout all of our roles. And then half of the TNTP staff will be working with us to co-create this new strategy. They have extensive experience as a national nonprofit founded by teachers to work alongside educators in schools and in district offices. And so what we hope to gain from that is to be able to identify our trends across our district as it relates to how we're implementing the work of equity throughout every division. We're excited about it. This new work with TNTP will be led by Wilma Alexander as our new DEI learning specialist, and we'll be supporting Wilma in that work.
Thank you very much, Carla. And so, board members, we wanted to provide the update as the policy request. We are really excited about the opportunity to continue this line of inquiry, to continue using best practice, research, input, and feedback from the field, from our classrooms, as we continue to work on our climate culture and our support for our students. So I think, we're trying to build off of what we're doing successfully, but to also figure out where we need to spend more of our time, energy, and resources. So I think in the spirit of the resolution policy, the spirit is one of continuous improvement. So none of the data is being shared to, lay blame or, point anything. It's really just to point out, here's where we are. We have our eyes set on excellence through equity. So it really gives us a bit of information, not the only information that we'll need, but a bit of information to continue to move our practice and to support our staff and our students.
Thank you very much. Madam Superintendent, any questions? Ms. Jackson and then Dr. Hall.
Thank you. Mrs. Carter and Ms. Chapman, as well as Madam Superintendent. I just had a couple questions. When we look at the clusters that you all put up, and it showed us the percentage of students in the building by race, as well as administrators, I'm sure that we have the information that shows us what clusters and buildings are certain races more consolidated in correctly, and also how the administration or teachers in that area and those clusters then represent or do not represent the population in the buildings? We have that, right?
We can get that type of information. One of the things that this is helping us to do is to think about how it is our data and information is set up, what kind of dashboards that we need to be able to watch in an ongoing way. So I know we have the ability to get at that. We would have to organize the data in that way.
Okay. The reason why I asked that, because the next question was then how is staffing done to balance representation to promote diversity amongst the students and the staff? And also my other question is, which either you may can answer, is what role does teacher background, experience, schooling, et cetera, play in their building placement? Because outside of which I know you guys are looking further than just race, because it could be a black teacher put in a black school that doesn't connect with black children. So I'm just wondering how, within that, when we're talking about, we're looking to about diversifying the workforce, which part of that is really getting into more so the background of the person or the administrator going into the building, and then how they're connecting and able to serve those in whatever cluster or building they're going to.
No, absolutely. And I think that is one factor, and I don't know. One of the things that we knew we would need as a result of sharing this information is it really begs, kind of a follow-up, a deeper conversation. So we are going to plan on as well having an extended conversation through the board's committee on equity, that sort of thing. But in relationship to your question about what factors are, kind of considered in our matching of staff to buildings, things of that nature. So we are looking at all of that information. So we're looking at experiences that would add value to the work of a particular building, and it might match with the broader work of the cluster, the academic program specifically in that building, definitely a commitment to the vision and strategies being used in the district. But also, we know that representation matters. It matters that students see persons that look like them. And so one of the things we are also trying to do is be very thoughtful in ensuring diversity in the staff in our building. So it is complex, the whole process. We are taking that into consideration, and what we'll have to do is monitor the data over time.
Okay, and lastly, my question has to deal with resource officers and student interactions.
Yes.
And you had read earlier that it was part of the resolution as far as that it be posted as far as how students, I can't recall the direct. Rights and thank you so much, Val. Students' rights and responsibility as it comes to resource and their resource officers in the building, their interactions. And you may have, I felt like you may address something like this, but because I missed it a little bit, I think I want to just ask this question. Are we looking to have outside, when I was in middle school, I remember having civics. And I had great teachers. I was at Goodyear Middle School, and I remember learning about my rights and responsibilities. And actually, my teacher at the time gave us a Bill of Rights and kind of talked to us about our interactions and rights that we had as citizens. And I'm just curious, are we looking to, because resource officers then reflect how students may interact with police outside of schooling. So I wonder, are we going to have any outside people come in outside of just posting that to kind of really explain to students maybe their rights, not just what they should do, but what their rights are when they need to speak, when they have to speak, what's their right as American citizens in general, and how then to interact from maybe an outside source?
Your question is a great one. I think one of the things that we started to better understand as we were addressing that charge was our need to make sure, first of all, that we were interpreting the charge really accurately, that we were leveraging research and best practice that's out there on how rights, responsibilities for interactions with resource officers, where that has been communicated elsewhere successfully. So to answer your question, yes, I think once we go to roll it out, we will do so with support so that we have, multiple roles that can help us effectively communicate with our students and families. But first, we really want to make sure that our first pass at this request is one, it's in alignment with what the board foresaw, and that we are getting some feedback for those that would need to receive it and understand it. So we get students' feedback, we get parents' feedback, our school resource officers, that they can also look it over. We want to make sure that we are able to jointly communicate a clear and common message.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Ms. Autry.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack in that report. So first, thank you for putting it together. Can we go back to the very first slide in the presentation? Just a second. I mean the very first slide.
Oh, you mean the one with your photo?
Yeah, that. There's not that one. There's a lesson to be learned.
This one?
Yes, that one. Okay, so that's what it's to my fellow board members. I just want to point out, I am holding ice cream, and so some friendly advice when you're visiting schools. Like Ms. Autry, I try to make sure I'm strategic about when I go. So there's ice cream when I get there. So I see she's laughing in the back, but I was at Mason, and she's not in that picture there. So right. So yeah. So it's important to get ice cream. Schools are better when there's ice cream. So anyway, I just want to put that out there. So some friendly advice. Okay. So I have probably more questions than we have time for. So let me try to be strategic in what I ask. So I understand. So I think one of the takeaways is that this is meant to kind of give us a baseline picture for sort of where we are, right? And so I guess the logical sort of question would be is, and I'm not asking for an answer here now today, but I just want to float it out there is sort of, so folks are trained, now what? We have this data, what do we do with it, right? How do we go about identifying sort of relevant KPIs that help us determine whether or not the trainings so we've trained 2,800 people, right? So what kinds of KPIs, do we have in place, or are we thinking about that will tell us whether or not the training has been impactful, right? So are we moving the needle as far as how people are thinking? And so we also talked about training as well being offered. Does that imply, and this is actually a real question, does that imply that the training's optional for folks?
Well, it hasn't been optional
Okay.
at this point.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, and then kind of the next piece, again, looking at the staff disparity between whites and blacks as far as teachers and staff, and on a related point, we talk about the importance of students having teachers and mentors who look like them. But what gets lost in translation there is, in the spirit of viewpoint diversity, white kids benefit from having black teachers too, and black principals too, right? Because they're learning how to interact with folks who are not like them, which is also a very important skill set, right? I think black kids are used to doing that all day, almost every day, all day, every day, right? But how are we trying to create in our white students and our white faculty opportunities for them to get outside their comfort zone and to be around folks who don't look like them and have to figure out, how do I communicate, right? How do I get past that initial fear of something being different from me, right? So that's something that I don't want us to lose sight of. And then kind of my last, this is my penultimate comment here, is we talked about the resource officer, and we just approved a liaison here tonight. And this is me expressing the viewpoint of one board member. But I think it's great that we get, students within our schools to understand, kind of the rights and responsibilities of a resource officer and their rights and responsibilities. But I keep thinking, in light of the current environment, how do we get more police officers around more kids, right? So because it's one thing to get those who are in our buildings, but there's some self-selection that kind of goes into police officers who want to be in buildings, and it's those who are, for whatever reason, not selecting those types of roles, right? Because police officers want to do different things. But how do we get there to be more collisions between kids and cops, kids and cops in neutral, positive environments that goes beyond the singular interactions that they have from a day-to-day standpoint, just in their high schools and whatnot. So that's just something I would love to see us think more about. And then last but not least, I'm really excited to hear how TNTP, is that what we call it? TNP? Okay. So I'm looking forward to seeing what TNTP can become when it's appropriately fed and watered, if that makes any sense. So I think that's my initial comments and questions, and I'll cede my time back to the rest of you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Autry.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I know we have more information coming. I just wanted to add, I'd like to see some data points around the most common reasons for the suspensions, and then also who's doing the suspensions. Is it concentrated with a certain, group of teachers? And I'm not insinuating anything, but that's just information I'd like to know as well. Like the referral, you mean? Yes, who's doing ultimately the referral? I'd like to see some data around that. And then also, like the average number of days that these kids are getting suspended when they are. That's what I'd like to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Can I just second everything that Ms. Autry just said? I just want to second that because, and thank you for saying that, because, so you may see a teacher, could be a white teacher, that tends to suspend more students of color, black kids, right? And I think the first thing that we jump to is that teacher is doing something wrong. And they may very well be. But it also may be a training opportunity too, right? And so I think that gets lost in translation oftentimes too, which is why I think it's important. I think this you already said this. It's important that we not weaponize what we see and see it for what it is, and that is to say that these are opportunities for improvement. And now listen, the law of large numbers dictates that there will be times when there are teachers and administrators, for lack of a term, have got to go, right? That can't be rehabilitated with training. But I want to make sure that we're all so I just want to make sure that we're all trying to give some grace and saying, all right, when I first see the data, before I point the finger, is there an opportunity for some counseling? The military does this all the time, right? Counseling. So how do I counsel the teacher administrator, and then provide ample training, and then do I see an improvement in the scores after the fact, right? And so now we may look at the data and there might be a long storied history of a lot of negative things that are going on that may precipitate a different set of actions. But again, I just want to, this kind of data can be radioactive if not handled appropriately and messaged appropriately as well. So, but I too would like to see all the same things that Ms. Autry talked about as well, because I don't subscribe to the theory that we're spending more black kids because black kids do more bad stuff. I just don't subscribe to that theory. So I think I suspect what we all probably think is that there's a lot of training opportunities. So anyway, I talked quite a bit. So let me cede the rest of the time back to you, Mr. President. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you very much. And first, I want to just weigh in and first say thank you for providing this report and update so that we can begin to really see the progress that's been made over the last year, as well as still identify what's needed. And my comments are multiple fold. So after I listened to the presentation, I had a few thoughts about what's the next level of data that we need, but then more importantly, as we look at this data, my question is, what's next? What are we doing with it? Because that is, and I know Dr. Hall mentioned some of that already, but that's really the biggest thing. And I want to just say this for everyone, since I live in the equity data world every day, that data itself can tell whatever story you want it to tell if you want to let it. And so it's when you start disaggregating the data and then layering the intersections of indicators that you really truly are able to grasp where the inequities are and then what you need to do to come up with your plan or to develop the KPIs for that. So thinking about those intersecting indicators, we talked about gender specifically on male, female, but if one of the things at the next level is understanding gender and race as combined indicators and whether or not there's a more disparate impact based off that. Going to schools, to Ms. Jackson's point, prior to us having the equity committee, and one of the reasons why we had to wrote this in the policy around the discipline and the recruitment is when we were in the Finance and Capital Management Committee, and Ryan, Mr. Pendleton, we were talking to him about how do we develop a calculator for distributing resources equitably, and he began to show us Forecast 5, I think is what it's called, and those indicators by school. And we spend more money for personnel in certain schools because they have a more tenured service levels. And so part of that is that begs some questions around how can we spread the love of that tenured expertise to schools that we see that are struggling the most when we talk about those different indicators who have a higher rate of newer teachers, right? So those are some things that I know Forecast 5, for example, can tell us, and I don't know if Ryan's gonna, or if we're gonna get a chance to see some of that data, but I know that was one thing that I wanted to follow up on. The other thing, and this will be my last thing that I'll say, is as we look at the data as well by grade level, I think it's also important as we think about the grade level that we see it by actual grade and cluster. So, for example, if I remember correctly, the slide had like K through 5 and then 6 through 8 or 9 through 12. But we also know that the earlier that students are suspended and the greater number, the more likely that they're going to continue to get suspended. And also their disinterest in school. So are there some initiatives or some greater supports we can provide in certain schools that we identify that have greater levels of discipline challenges for those lower grades? So those are just some things that I don't have the answers now, because I don't have that data, but if I want to ask for that next level of data, that's what I'm asking for. Ms. Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I had this question, and you just made me remember because I didn't get to it, about the discipline, the suspensions. Madam Superintendent, the charts that show, for instance, K through 5 suspensions, am I to understand that those are out-of-school suspensions, or do those include both in-school and out-of-school suspension?
The majority of those, especially for our younger grades, we have a new policy from even the state of Ohio.
Exactly.
So we
That's where I
are
was going.
on the path to honoring that policy, and so more of that is in school. So when we talk with you again about the kind of so what, now what, those sorts of things, we can also share with you, some of the strategies that are in place, because again, the request from this policy was very, kind of explicit and limited in what you requested, but we also have a lot of things that are in place that are working, finding some success, and so we'd like to be able to share that with you as well, share how we are meeting the state's requirements and where we are in relationship to that, but as well thinking about the next level of data that we will need.
Yes, thank you, Madam Superintendent, because I think that can kind of answer your question, and also for those who are listening, as far as the Ohio school discipline laws and regulation, the changes that were made like in March, dealing with, if someone can help me, it's either K through third or K through second, that they are go more towards a restorative practice and them not being really suspended outside of school.
Correct.
So Dr. Akbar, I think that would kind of speak to when you're talking about that younger demographic, when they start to get suspended like out of school earlier, how that can set up a trend. So I think when we hear more about Superintendent, you made the statement, we're getting to that. I don't what does that mean?
So again, we'll be prepared to have a deeper conversation about that in the board's committee, because I really think it's difficult to just put up just the numbers without the dialogue and without you being able to ask the additional questions, and for us to really be able to share where we are in our practice, what we're seeing. So I think this is really worthy of an ongoing and deeper a conversation, and we'd like to share our plans for doing that with others, so with a greater representation than is even here tonight, so that we have representatives of teachers and principals, and also in those types of conversations. So more to come with that, and with that, I will say we'll probably need to figure out what's a first set of data that we can feel comfortable with, that gives us, kind of directionally the information that we need. It'll be difficult to go into everything we could know, but I think we'll need to figure out, kind of what's that, as you talked about it, Dr. Hall, what are those KPIs? And then we kind of stay the course to kind of watch those and watch our progress, and have some comfort that while that won't tell it all, because we won't be able effectively to monitor everything we should, but with using that data with other bits of information, we feel like it's giving us a picture and informing our practice in positive ways.
Yeah, I just have one quick follow-up comment to that. I think the other reason why I think this is really challenging is because, folks are going to judge us by how fast we move on this too. Right. And so there are folks who are going to say that you aren't moving with the necessary urgency. When I say you, I mean like this room full of folks, right, that we are not moving with the right urgency. And so I think it's a tenuous balance between, and I'm not here to say I'm the expert in how you strike that balance, but I think it's a challenge in wanting to make sure that you have the requisite sort of buy-in and good data, but how do you do those things with a pace that keeps the community at large confident in our ability to move expeditiously towards the outcomes that they expect. So,
thank you very much. Any other comments or questions for Madam Superintendent? Hearing and seeing none, we will move to the President's report. And so, first, thank you to the entire board for getting back with Ruth so that we can get our special meeting scheduled. We will have our special meeting on Wednesday at 5:30 here to begin the process of interviewing two firms to assist us in our treasurer and CFO search coming up. And so look forward to having that those conversations on Wednesday. So thank you to the board for that. With that being also said, we also should consider ensuring that we also can get this retreat scheduled, even if we have to break it up into two, Part A and Part B. But we want to get that scheduled so we can make sure we respond to Ruth on those as well. And we'll begin working on that agenda once we know how we're going to set it up. And so I want to appreciate the superintendent for working with us on that. The other item is with opening of school. There will be tons of buildings opening, as we heard earlier. If we could do our best to try to get to a few of those schools in our clusters, to clap them in and welcome them in, that will be a great show for the board's presence, as well as it's just probably some of the best times you'll have is seeing new clothes, new book bags, and new energy for that new year. So I appreciate everyone jumping on that, and hopefully Ruth, one of the Ruths, can help us get those scheduled. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about really with the board is this board put forward our bold vision and priorities in advanced APS in the 3-and-3 plan, and we heard about that a little bit earlier today, where achievement, equity, and engagement were foundational to how we see us moving the district forward. And so as we're continuing to do that, and we have a great opportunity to join together, everyone in this room, this board, and the administration to do that, and specifically to move the district forward around a vision of excellence through equity. I really think one of the ways we can do that together and collectively is as we move forward with thinking about the engagement of our community. I know last year I put forward a policy for consideration for live streaming. I think that's a great opportunity for us to all come together in engagement so that we can bring that excellence through equity forward. But both our committee meetings and our board meetings as that opportunity, I think that will be a chance to see those who might not be able to make it to our meetings, but still will be able to see how we get to this meeting where we vote yes or no on a number of items that come before us, that many of them have had deep discussions in our committee meetings, and we don't get that opportunity to really do all of that here. So I wanted to open the floor to this body to talk about, your thoughts about us live streaming both our committee meetings and our board meetings. Ms. Alexander.
Yes, Dr. Akbar, I thought in our last policy meeting that we decided we were going to table that for the next meeting, and that was what was requested, and so that we can have a deeper dive in reference to the live streaming. And there were some questions that legal had with the policy, and so as well as some things that we had as far as technology. So we still need to, I think we can still have that discussion, but I think it would be good to have it during the policy meeting versus here. I mean, we can have some here, but I know we don't want to keep everybody. I know people want to see what we're doing and what's going on and be able to move forward with what we need to complete. But that was one of the requests at the last meeting, that we table it and that be discussed at the policy meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Dr. Hall?
Yeah, thank you. I can't comment on the last policy meeting because I wasn't there, and so I also can't comment to questions around legal or other requests for me because again, I wasn't there. But let me sort of speak to this philosophically. and please clean me up if I get any of this wrong, anybody, right? But those meetings that occur monthly for each committee, those are public meetings, and just as this is a public meeting. And so one of the reasons why, again, from a policy standpoint, I don't mean school board policy, but I think sort of overall sort of policy in general, right? That you have public meetings is because you want to allow folks in the public to come and see for themselves, what exactly is happening. They can come in person to do that, right? We live stream here as well. And so I guess as I'm thinking through this on the fly, if the state legislature, passes laws requiring these meetings to be public, they do that for a reason. And so the spirit of that is to increase the level of transparency and, for those in the community that want to be informed, right? And if that's the case, I can't think of a reason why we would not, in fact, want to live stream our committee meetings, because anybody in the public could come at any time to those committee meetings, just like they could come here to this committee meeting. So again, so while I was not privy, while I was not intended at the last meeting and don't want to speak on that, philosophically, I would think that if the intent of the legislature was to create some transparency between boards like this and the public, I can't see why we would not want to take steps to ensure that we were doing all that we could and all that we could do to ensure that there is a level of transparency. And so again, I don't have a objection to us live streaming committee meetings because they're open to the public anyway. And so I don't see the harm in us trying to make it easier for the public to attend, whether it's in person or virtually. We know that we have a high poverty rate in Akron, and there are a lot of folks that who don't have vehicles to travel downtown to attend in person. And so I think when we think about equity in a community, right? I think that's something else that we got to think through. Is okay. Well, we have folks who, if we're going to require folks to be in person, we're in effect we're disenfranchising people because they don't have the requisite transportation to get here to this building downtown to attend a meeting that's a public meeting in person. And so again, having live streaming allows folks to sit there on their smartphone from home, or if they're at work, and we know a lot of our parents are working multiple jobs, so they want to take a break and watch a meeting, or they want to sit in the bathroom and watch a meeting, they can do that too. So again, I'm just in favor of whatever is going to make it easier for the public to see what we do here. I think that there's a lot of things like we just discussed the equity piece. There's a lot to be proud of. There's a lot of work that happens within these four walls, and I would think that the fine folks in this room would want to make sure people had a chance to be able to see and comment on. So to me, again, while I was not in the last meeting, Mr. Alexander, and don't want to presume to know what was discussed. Again, I'll come back to sort of the underlying philosophy that I think should govern this board and the folks in this room. And that is, I think more transparency is better than less. And so, if we have the opportunity to essentially allow for more live streaming, I think we should do that. I mean, we just approved, multiple high-level positions that are not cheap to this district, right? And those folks are going to come here and they're going to do good work that we're going to see in committee meetings and we're going to see here. So why would we not want to afford the fine people in this room, every opportunity for their work to be showcased publicly? Again, these are meetings that are public meetings. So again, I'm looking forward to having a more robust conversation. I'll have to make sure I attend the next policy meeting in person. Even though I'm not assigned to that committee, I'm going to show up to that meeting next time so we can have that conversation there. But again, while there may be obstacles that we have to talk about and address, I'm in favor of anything that makes it easier for the public to observe the fine work that's being done here. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, and Dr. Hall, we were just saying there's so much to discuss, and legal said we need to probably look at it, and I don't want us to go too fast and make a mistake with that. So we were talking about we were going to look at that. It's not saying it's going to happen. It's not saying it's not going to happen, but it is something we still need to discuss to take a deeper dive and say, okay, what should we do? How should we do this if we're going to do it to make it work? And so that's what we're talking about, and that was what was discussed at the meeting and stated at the meeting. That's why we were going to table it, and maybe we can have more discussion at the next meeting, because we also have to make sure that we take in consideration when we have these policy committee meetings, rather, is that everybody has taken consideration their personal time as well, because we have people who've been here all day. They come to this meeting, they come to those meetings, and we want to keep them to the point that we can have good discussion, but also be courteous of their time as well. And so we went over 45 minutes past our meeting time, so therefore that's why we said we would table it for the next meeting. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew that was the reason why we said we would table it, so we can have more time to discuss it, let legal look at it like they're supposed to, and then be able to possibly move forward with it when we get to that point.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Autry?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I also wasn't at that meeting as well, but just my personal opinion as a board member, I are on the side of being transparent as well. I just know that's one of the strong hallmarks with some of the newer board members since we've been on board, making our meetings, more accessible. And so to me, that just kind of goes along with it. So I understand there might be some legal things we need to research, but that's just where I stand on it personally.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Jackson?
I would just agree with the transparency portion of it. And since, as Dr. Hall has said, it's an open public meeting in any event, at first I was under the thought that we discuss everything in a board meeting that happens at a committee meeting, so the people will be informed if they stream into the board meeting. So would you really have to tape both of them? However, as you stated, Hall, either way, it's a public meeting and the information is available. So if the goal is transparency, and that's what we're speaking to make it more accessible to people who may be at work or on their cell phones, just to make sure all the information is getting out, then yeah, I'm not opposed to that either. So I'm just saying that I'm in agreement.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right. Well, I appreciate the discussion on this item. And the main reason why I wanted to bring it up is I think we have an opportunity, all of us, to really move the vision of equity through excellence, the excellence through equity vision forward in all that we do. And that means we're going to also look at, some of the things that we're doing, and if we think about the Open Meetings Act specifically and apply that from when it was passed to 2022, to me it makes perfect sense to do that. And so just wanted to just get a sense of what the board's thoughts were on that item. And that is the second to last thing I wanted to say. The last thing we'll be discussing today, we have worked out an agreement with the treasurer, CFO, again, to stay on with us until the end of the year as treasurer of record, and we'll discuss that resolution as well as begrudgingly accept his resignation. Hopefully that disappeared off the agenda. But no, that's all I have. Any further questions? Hearing and seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Hall.
Yeah, is there any way that we can contractually bind Mr. Pendleton to not be able to vacate his current job? Maybe we should get legal researching that, so then we can hold him for the duration of his contract. I'm kidding, sort of, but we're going to miss you, Mr. Pendleton. So.
Thank you very much. I did sort of look into that, and I don't think we can. Just joking. All right, with that being said, we do have the treasurer's report. So, Mr. Pendleton.
No report.
All right, no report. We will move next to our committee reports, legal contracts and board policy. Mr. Alexander. All right, Mr. Perry.
Thank you. So we had a meeting on August 1st of this year for the Legal Contracts and Policy Committee. A few things we discussed were the upcoming free OSBA and Neola presentation online. It's going to be this Wednesday from 11 to noon. It's called Accelerating Student Success Through Board Policy, and looking forward to attending that myself for sure. Other thing we discussed was Policy 2266, which is the non-discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs or activities. As most of you know, that policy was set aside in 2021 because of the pandemic and due to staffing changes. We talked about minor updates, clean up the policy. There's a copy of it for all the members in the board docs documents. We also addressed the issue of anonymous reporting. That was obviously something that was a big deal with that policy. We also discussed Policy 5205, which is the student names and pronouns policies. We talked about having that cleaned up in our system. Mr. Howard Lawson talked about the need for technology to address some of the issues with that policy and being able to clean up some of the pronouns that we're going to have issues with. So that's an ongoing discussion that we discussed in our last board policy meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else?
We do have a policy reading.
Okay.
All right, we have for this evening for the third and hopefully final reading, Policy 2266, non-discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs or activities. This is the third reading, and I make a motion that we accept this as read. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been moved to adopt Policy 2266 as read. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
It's been seconded by Mr. Perry. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing and seeing none, we will do a roll call vote, please. Mr. Pendleton?
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Autry?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Dr. Hall?
Aye.
Ms. Jackson?
That make sure I was trying to read through it, make sure you ain't sliding nothing in there, NJ. Aye.
Thank you. Mrs. McKittrick?
Yes.
Dr. Akbar?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Does that conclude your report?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We next move to Finance and Capital Management. Ms. Autry?
Thank you. No report this evening.
Thank you very much. Instructional Policy and Student Achievement.
No report.
Okay, no report. Now, Equity Committee. Dr. Hall?
Mr. Alexander is going to take care of this report this month. Mr. Alexander?
Thank you. Equity Committee meeting met on 6/26, which was a couple weeks ago, and a little over a week and a half ago. And we opened at 5:04. We read the meeting of approval of the meeting minutes. Those in attendance was Mrs. Chapman, Superintendent Fowler Mack, Mrs. Carter, Ms. Alexander, Dr. Akbar, and myself. We started with the superintendent's report. There was no superintendent's report. We went on to human resource recruitment and retention. Mrs. Carter gave a presentation on that. Mrs. Carter gave a presentation on the recruitment and retention. She talked about the recruitment and how the district is focused on equity in the board's advanced APS 3 and 3 plan. Her highlights were the TNTP and the Black Talent pipeline that will focus on recruitment and retention as well as called there's also an initiative called the Stay Interviews. We talked about the employee resource groups who shared the committee, who shared information. They have a web page that has been added to the Human Resources and District Hub site. Dr. Akbar reminded the group also that there's a parade on the 27th of August, which is the Pride Parade, and we know we had a good number of people there last year, and we were encouraging people to support it again this year. Mrs. Carter also sent out a video of one of our APS employees that started in Akron Public Schools, and the video also talked about why she stayed here in Akron Public Schools and not go to another school district. So that was a nice piece, and if you guys haven't gotten that or haven't seen it, we'll make sure she gets it to you. Ms. Chapman also introduced Ms. Alexander, who's a newly appointed DEI learning specialist for the district. The superintendent also said how excited she was to have her and her share expertise in education in the classroom management, and it will also include equity in the classroom for the classroom teachers. Ms. Chapman also talked about gave what her report or what she gave a little earlier, and talking about all those who are being trained. As mentioned, there were about 2,800 people who have been trained already. Talked about the new faculty training, which was held on the 27th of this year, July 27th of this year. She also talked about bus drivers who will be getting trained on the 10th, which is this Wednesday, and then Thursday, the secretaries will be getting trained, and hopefully they'll have everybody trained, that they plan on having cluster training take place on the 22nd, have all those who they would like to have trained at this point. Superintendent Fowler-Mack shared the connection of curriculum adoption process to the board's request for current culturally relevant content and material in the racial equity policy and board resolution, which was part of today's presentation as well. They also talked about the report which was given today by Superintendent Fowler-Mack, Mrs. Chapman, and Mrs. Carter, who talked about all these different areas that we were having concerns with, which talked about discipline data, training, hiring, promotions, demographics, and all the things that we saw earlier where we had questions and requested data for. They will also will include sharing out on a higher level of analysts regarding family engagement, and that will come later by Mrs. Stancy Sykes. So we ended the meeting at 5:52 p.m. That's the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone have any questions for the Equity Committee? All right, seeing none, we will move to unfinished business. ESSER priorities and funding discussion. Any discussion from the board on these items? Mrs. McKittrick.
Quick question. So ESSER 3 funds have to be used by the end of September of 2024. Is that correct?
Correct.
I guess it's a comment rolled into a question or vice versa. Why are we spending it down so quickly when we still have over 2 years? What if there comes a need and the money's gone? Very simply. Thank you.
If you're relating the spending it down so quickly to the gas gauge, those are related to strategic initiatives that have been vetted, right, for the past 12 plus months, but they haven't been committed yet. So they're estimates about future programs, and even though it said about 85% of those funds have been committed, they're committed in terms of strategic planning, ideas, staffing, costs, purchase service to the best of the estimate that we have now. And it's what we tried to clarify through that third attachment that has the board resolutions, and then the ones in ESSER 3 that don't have board resolutions would be coming back to the board. So really, to get back into the detail of that question, we'd go through all of the 9 strategic major investments and their subparts. So they haven't been committed yet, only in concept, only in kind of rolling out those concepts.
and to extend that, committed in terms of concept in furthering a lot of the work that we have been doing, because we are looking to deepen our strategies around career and college academies and student supports and engagement. So we do have some flexibility, and we have tried to communicate that in all of our presentations. So we've tried to kind of summarize where you can go back and see in presentation after presentation, we do have the ability to make some adjustments. As you said, we do have 2 years remaining. That isn't a long time in the grander scheme of things to really not only have those funds earmarked, but to have the corresponding, whether it be training, corresponding experiences, corresponding things happening and occurring, that really has to be strategically paced and implemented with support. And so we are happy to continue to answer any specific questions about any of the plans that are on the table for the use of those funds, and to talk more about how it aligns with the strategic direction of the district, the work of the system, and definitely in preferencing support for our students to recover and accelerate their learning, which is the primary goals of those resources. But when we compare ourselves in terms of our progress with other districts, and we talk constantly with our peers in the field, we're right on target. So we're not hurrying, and we're not ahead of. We are right on target, and our plan mirrors a lot of the plans that are in place in urban districts, because we experience most often some of the similar needs for our students, for our families, needs for engagement, fundamental supports, buildings, things of that nature.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Dr. Hall?
Yeah. Let me weigh in on this topic too. Again, going back to the gas gauge, I think that because I think I misinterpreted it the first time I saw it, because I was confusing two terms. I was confusing the word committed and encumbered, right? And those two words are dissimilar. And so really all we're saying here is that we've spent $14.8 million according to this most recent gas gauge in the slide deck. It probably is a little bit more than that now. I'd hazard a guess. But it still leaves approximately $80 million left that is either committed or remaining. But even the things that are committed, there's still flexibility, because there are things that can happen. I can think of several examples, which I'm not going to get into tonight, because we'll be here for 2 hours if I do that. But by the way, when I was in 6th grade, I got class clown and most talkative. Does the most talkative part surprise anybody there? Okay. Anyway, so again, I think that there are definitely items that can come up that would require us to pivot from this plan, because this is a plan, right? And only $15 million of it has been spent. The rest of it is still attached to a plan, which is always, if we're intellectually honest, it's always what can be changed. When things change in the environment that would dictate that it change, right? So anyway, I've tried to focus my thoughts on this on, well, what are some of those other things that could come up that would impact this? And so I think I'll save that for other conversations. But again, I'm no longer interpreting this the way that I did before, which was, we've spent all this money. It's not spent. It's committed, not encumbered. And as this board has every opportunity to change the direction and to reprioritize spend. So if there are things that folks in this board or this board collectively feel strongly about, we can always, amend the plan. And so that's, I think those are my comments. I don't think I had a question in there. Just want to make sure you all knew that I got most talkative in 6th grade for Ms. Vincenti, since that's the theme of tonight. But.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay.
Could I just say that as the board continues to consider, we would benefit from really more specific questions as to what piece of the plan is something that, requires some additional information for you to understand why that was identified as a need, and what the hope is or the intention is as it relates to supporting our students, so that we do have thriving scholars, thriving schools, and a thriving community at large. So we have spent, again, the better part of a year in a planning process and receiving feedback, input. And so as we move on, because there are commitments tied into the plans that we have put forth, and so we will need to have a bit more specific information to assist us.
I appreciate that. And I think we have, for what I can characterize, if I could, from the board's perspective, the vast majority of what's in the plan, I think most of the board believes is something we should look at. One of the things I know that I've asked for that would be good to also look at is to look at all the buckets for each one of those priorities. So, not just the ESSER funding, but also funding that comes from non-general funds, so other grants or what have you, and then also what we spend or are spending for general fund for all of those. The other piece that I think would be good as we think about being innovative and sustainable, one of the things that would be good too is to, as we layer equity on top of all of that, is to be able to see in a more comprehensive way is where, like, what schools are we spending and for each one of these priorities and how much, and basically, any data that's supporting spending more in one area over another. So I think that would be kind of helpful for me. And then the last thing I'll say is one of the reasons why I've tried to get us to have these discussions to make sure that we have this is because we do as a board have a responsibility to also approve the plan so that that the district can continue to move forward and or provide where those areas where we should think a little deeper on, because I do agree with the superintendent that there's a lot that goes into moving the district forward in these ways, and so we do have to kind of come together to say, here's what the plan is, and we approve that plan to move forward, or we approve all pieces, but this part of the plan, and this is what we need to adjust to. I do think we need to do that in a little bit quicker way, so that there is a little more concrete direction. So that's one thing that I want to say, because that's why I've kind of tried to get us to have these discussions.
Right, and the CFO would need to share around kind of our capability around accounting for every single fund, those sorts of things. But as it relates to equity and thinking about equitable flow of resources, both how it is currently happening in our system and what the potential is, even for our ESSER funds, which builds off of our current practice in the district. We do have some information that we can share. One of the bodies of work that we did this year based on the questions and ask of the board was to look at what equity in allocations, equity in resources, what that looked like in terms of dollars, in terms of human capacity, things of that nature, and kind of what the thought pattern was behind that. So we do have information relative to that we can share at some point in time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Autry?
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a specific question about the innovation grants, and I was just wondering, is there anything in place yet for that? Because I know there's like $1 million for high-need schools and then an additional $1 million for teachers. Is there a process in place already for teachers?
We do have a process. We haven't yet launched it. We're planning on launching that as a part of the back to school. So we'd be happy to share with you, kind of here's the criteria, here's, kind of the angles. So it not only was for schools, but it also were dollars set aside for our scholars themselves to be able to direct some student impact where students can work together to make a difference in their school environments and leveraging our student leadership team. So we'll be able to share around those plans as well.
Thank you very much. Dr. Hall?
Yeah, let me just jump back in. I mean, I keep talking about this word flexibility, right, and the word plan. And I think it's important to keep that in mind because in the next 12 to 18 months, there may be new ideas that come up, right? I mean, there's a lot of smart people in this room, right? And so we have a smart and gifted superintendent as well, right? So she may have additional new ideas, as she's reviewing the latest literature or the latest trends, right? So I think it's important that we keep our options open and say, this is a plan, right? And so leave room for lightning to strike, right? And then I think, more pragmatically, I think, there are still more things that this board is going to talk about in the future, one of which is Kenmore, right? And so we passed a resolution previously, and so there's an update that's due around that at some point, and so there'll be more robust conversation around Kenmore. And so some of these dollars may need to be allocated in that particular way too, right? But those are decisions that have yet to be made, right? Or not made, right? If for better or for worse. I've gotten emails from teachers saying, "Hey, I replied back to that survey asking for feedback, and I think teacher compensation should be addressed," right? Coincidentally or not, we're also involved in negotiations, right? Now we can't talk about that other than to say the word, right? But again, the outcome of that may also impact this, right? We don't know, right? There's a lot of things that we don't know. And so that's why, for me, I think it's important that we sort of try to maintain maximal mental agility and flexibility around this topic and not painting ourselves into a corner around the kinds of things that we will or won't do. Now, I can tell you as I go through this plan, there's nothing in this plan that I would take umbrage with. I think everything in here is fantastic. I really couldn't give you a line item in this plan that I disagree with or think is off base. Now philosophically, while I might like to see some of the money more money in different buckets, sure. But there's nothing in the plan that I look at and say I'm opposed to that, right? And so I think that's a testament to all the work that's been done by the superintendent and all of you in this room in putting that plan together. But I just want to make sure that we, say this out loud that that there are still things that can happen that can impact this plan, and I think that we just have to be honest about it, and just allow allow and try to plan for those types of things when those types of things occur. So those are my comments, and I'll see the rest of my time back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? If not, we will move forward. Hearing and seeing none, we will now move to new business, where there is a resolution to accept the resignation of Treasurer CFO Pendleton and terminate the contract ending on 31 August of 2022 and simultaneously appointing Treasurer CFO Pendleton as the Treasurer of Record to go until the 31st of December 2022. So the resolution is before you in 30.1, and I will accept a motion to move that resolution for approval.
I so move.
It's been properly moved by Mr. Perry. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Dr. Hall. Any discussion on the motion to approve the termination of Treasurer CFO's contract by accepting his resignation and appointing him as the Treasurer of Record? Hearing and seeing none, we will do a roll call vote, please. Mr. Pendleton.
Ms. Autry?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Dr. Hall?
Aye.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mrs. McKittrick?
Yes.
Dr. Akbar?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
All the drama today.
Thank you.
So with this action, we are going to be bidding our treasurer farewell officially, and we will be preparing something to formally do that at the next meeting. But we also just wanted to say that we appreciate Mr. Pendleton's ongoing support as we think through what our next treasurer and CFO will be and what we want in that person. Please stay tuned as we will provide some more public updates to everyone about that process. But we will begin that process on Wednesday. So hopefully those of you who are able can come to that meeting as we talk through two firms who may assist us. As there's no other business to come before the board today, we do have a motion. We do have a need to recess into executive session. And so the president will accept a motion to recess into executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 121.22, G1, for the purposes of considering the employment or dismissal of a public employee or official of the school district. Is there a motion? Thank you very much. It has been properly moved by Mr. Alexander. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Dr. Hall. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing and seeing none, we will have a roll call vote. Mr. Pendleton?
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Dr. Hall?
Aye.
Ms. Jackson?
Aye.
Mrs. McKittrick?
Yes.
Dr. Akbar?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Autry?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will have a need to return and take action likely after executive session. So I wanted to point that out, that we may have an item when we return. With that being said, we now stand in recess into executive session at 7:50 p.m. Thank you very much, and welcome back to the regularly scheduled board meeting on 8 August 2022. We have now returned from executive session, and we do have one item to consider for a motion. So the president will accept a motion to approve the resolution of the intention to consider termination of a teaching contract. Is there a motion on the table?
I so move.
Second.
It's been properly moved by Mr. Perry and seconded by Ms. Autry. Is there any discussion on this motion? Hearing and seeing none, we'll do roll call vote, please. Mr. Pendleton?
Dr. Hall?
Abstain?
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mrs. McKittrick?
Yes.
Dr. Akbar?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Autry?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. As there's no other business to come before the board, we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
It's been properly moved by Mr. Alexander.
Second.
Is there a second? It's been seconded by Mr. Perry. I don't think we got to do a roll call vote on that.
You don't have to roll call.
Okay, that's right. All right, so thank you very much. We now stand into recess to our next meeting on Wednesday. Thank you. Have a great day. At 9:03 p.m.